As much as we have, or I have, and you've joined in, at least tacitly, you didn't jump up and rail and wrestle me to the floor. I was going to say, as much as we have kicked around talk, and then I was going to take the blame, but by acquiescence you have agreed. But let's go back to some further additional, conditional, in praise of talk. Erasmus would probably find it acceptable for me to steal his line from what I'm going to say, because he probably would have thought that much talk was folly anyway. But we know better. In some circumstances, talk is the only thing that you can do. If you're going to write down anything this week other than your shopping list in your brain, because it's serious. Now, this is all mortal, everyday circumstance, but I believe that some of you may be able to even see us stretch it over to where it still has some validity, even into new territories in a slightly skewed manner. But literally, this is not metaphorical chit-chat yet. Literally, there are some circumstances in which there is nothing you can do but talk. And it is proper. Let's see how many examples I have to pull out before you begin to see it. We are, of course, referring to all mortal conditions, which is the only one that should interest any of you people. If you were in a position where it was not profitable for you to fight, if I must be specific, we're talking about down at the nonverbal areas in the nervous system loop, down at the good old red circuit, the stomping grounds. If you're in a position that does not seem profitable, does not seem possible, does not seem feasible to fight, and yet it seems to be also not proper the time to run, to simply turn and tacitly run. And these circumstances have arisen in your life. And I say fight, this would of course would apparently apply more to men than it would to you women, except now you can begin to take it metaphorically. But men, you can take it literally, and women should have been able to observe this in their life. That we're speaking of an area that at first glance you would think requires no talk whatsoever. The good old animal level, fight or flee. And yet there have been examples in all of your lives that neither one seemed to be proper. What would have been proper, and what you probably, at least in some instances, did, was talk. When from one viewpoint, the kinds of viewpoints that I have been trying to enumerate and sketch out for you for other reasons at other times, to see that under certain conditions, from certain views, to talk about that which should be nonverbal is even more than a waste of time. That is ill-appropriate, ill-timed, ill-founded, unprofitable. But if there is some validity, something useful to try and see it from that view, then you have got to by now understand that the apparent opposite is equally as valid and is as pregnant with other potential information as the first view. There would be circumstances wherein you do not feel the inclination to fight, and yet you do not feel that it would be proper to just turn around and walk off and say nothing. Perhaps you could get away with it, perhaps you could not, whether we're talking about now literally being in a physical position of being threatened, your health, or whether it be metaphorical. And rather than silently leave, rather than fight, It may be proper. The only thing to do that would be profitable, I don't mean the only thing possible to do, but the only thing to do would be talk your way out of it. To talk about it. How about what would appear to be the domain a little further up the old nervous system loop into the emotions? The talking limbic blue circuit area. We have kicked this around enough from one view, so how about it from this view? People find themselves in a position that they apparently cannot non-verbally show, non-verbally transfer a display of affection, and therefore they are left with saying, I love you. Now, I have from other views tried to make you see that that was less than 100% efficient. I have even tried to get you to see, when I was pushing it further, that there is a certain kind of satirical basis for someone saying I love you. To wit, if you actually love somebody, if there's that kind of real, fairly well founded and stable affection, energy draw between two people, it's not necessary that you keep telling somebody, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Right? Not necessarily. There are people wired up, not continually necessary, but there are people wired up that at times, under certain conditions, with their own family, with their own lover, may find, it's not dissimilar to what I was saying, that you find you're in the position that I almost should be fighting somebody, or I should just run for it, I should just leave. But yet neither one of those, even if I had the opportunity to do one or the other, neither one alone seems to be appropriate. So you may find yourself that you sort of want to reach up and hug somebody, or you want to do something, and for whatever reason, we're not going into reasons, since there are none, see. I was trying to save some time tonight. But for whatever seems to be the reason, whatever seems to be the motivation in the person, that they cannot apparently turn around and do it. To go, or whatever it is. And so they say, I love you. That talk is the only thing that will do. Now, I do not bring this out tonight to try to get you to see it as acting as an apologist for romantic chit-chat, or poetry, or Hallmark cards. And it is not to say that it is not valid when it is possible to not have to tell somebody that you love them. It's all according to what kind of energy transfer is taking place, what territory you're in within the body of life, and what territory you are in inside of your own nervous system. Under certain conditions, there would be nothing wrong with saying, as ludicrous as it is from one view, to say to somebody, I love you. When from one view, saying I love you is, how can I exaggerate and make an example? How about other areas though? How about with pets? To tell Rover, I love you. I love you, you little rascal. How about the departed? Your husband, your wife, your mother. From certain views, you could certainly make a satirical, if not sarcastic, comment about people out at a cemetery in the West laying down flowers, or to see somebody out there staying at a grave marker and you see their lips moving. Or in other parts of the world, to see somebody lay food out on a grave. Of course, if you're from another part of the world, the old joke is, when do you expect the person to come out and eat that food? And the person in the other part of the world says, about the same time that yours are going to come out and smell the flowers. Even if you're not at the place of interment with somebody deceased, that people do talk to the dead. I'm not talking about attempting to talk to Atlantis, but probably all of you, at some, probably everybody on this planet has said something, no matter, and I'm not now saying that has any kind of extraordinary validity, but somebody may be staying around and just say something to their mother, maybe dead 20 years ago, or just see something that reminds them of their mother, and they just might say something about, boy, I miss you. What else can you do? besides extenuating imagination of people believing that they might go to a soothsayer or a medium or somebody, and the medium say, well, I'll talk to your mother for you. Forget all that. That there you stand and you're reasonably sane, and you look at the calendar and it's your mother's birthday and she's been dead, and it may just strike you and you just may say something about, you know, damn, I miss you. Yeah. And you don't, let's say that you don't know any better. You don't know where mother is, you don't know anything about life after death, since ordinary people don't know anything about life. So they certainly don't know anything about life after death. But what else can you do if you're moved to say something? What else can you do? You can go out and non-verbally take flowers out to the grave, which is fine. But people can even do that, to save their money and buy a big old bouquet and go out and put it on mother's grave, and yet you'll go by and you'll see them still standing after all that, and it's still not enough. And they may look around to make sure, but they'll go, you know, geez, I miss you. Or, you know, wherever you are, if you can hear me, you know, I hope you're all right. God, I love you. What else can you do, is what I'm trying to get you to see. That as much as you can talk around, it will reach certain places in life, certain ordinary circumstances, and there is nothing else will do but talk. Does it make any more sense than it did 10 minutes ago? I'll wait a second. Think about these. Don't look for anything extraordinary yet. Just everyday affairs of trying to get through life for 60 years. And that your mother or your father, your brother's dead, and something like this happens and you're reminded of it, or you go out to the cemetery on their birthday or the day they died or something, and you just have a feeling you want to do something. You cannot hug them. You can't touch them. What else can you do? Talk to a dead person. That's one step from there in ordinary life to people's idea of the gods, of course. Which, trying to do this kind of activity, for you people getting this on tape at other times and other places, the ordinary conceptions of gods is just irrelevant, at the least. I mean, it's a distraction and a waste of energy once it's understood. But in the ordinary course of affairs, there is nothing to laugh at, and it's not really a waste of time with ordinary people, because they're not capable of wasting time. It's life operating in an efficient manner, but of people trying to talk to a God. I refer you back, similar to me my example about the deceased. With an ordinary person, they don't understand anything about God. They got a rabbi's word for it, a priest's word for it, a shaman's word for it somewhere. They don't know. And of course, you people know by now, the rabbi and the priest and the shaman, they don't know either. It's just their job to go, yes. That's what a priest is. You ask him for his job classification, any man of the cloth. His job is doing what he does. That's it. Does that mean playing like you know God? Yes. But if I had you down and got you half drunk, you'd probably say that you're not any more sure than I am. That's my job. At any rate, again, assuming that you were just fairly ordinary and sane in life, and you're in the circumstances, maybe your mother has just died, whatever it is. Maybe you feel like you're coming down with something and you go to a place of worship. Or you're just driving along the street and the sun's shining and you think, God, how good it is to be alive, and poor mother's dead. Or you're on the way to the doctor and I may be dying. And it's this feeling that people have that there's got to be something else. All that, you know all that. I don't have to describe it. What else are you going to do? You cannot get your hands on God, a God, any more than you can the deceased. So what can you do? Were it not for talk, we wouldn't have religion. Not that you people need it, but life needs it. There could be no religion without talk. There's no such thing as a non-verbal religion. There's no such thing as a God that's a God to anybody that does not have any language. That's the first thing a God's got to do, at least in the 3D world as known to man. The first thing that God got to do, he can make the creatures, and he can make them purple, green, tall, short, male, female, no sex at all, 14 arms, 2 legs, 7 eyes. He can do anything he wants to, except there's one thing he's got to do. He's got to put language up here so they can say the word God. Or else he's going to do this. And it's like some little street vendor that put all these wind-up toys, and they all run away and leave him. And he hollers, come back, you belong to me. And they just don't even hear him. He has got to put language in, because you cannot have any kind of religion, you can't have any kind of apparent longing for the more simplistic under the guise of the more complex, unless the creatures have language, at least in the 3D world is known to man. You have situations throughout life wherein nothing will do but talk, wherein there is nothing else to do. Nothing, 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 nothing. That you are driven, not through your own personal experience, not through your own genetic makeup, but through the genetic makeup of life. That here you are driven to want to do something. Now I tried to give you examples. That you want to feel something, you want to express something, you wish you could grab hold of something, your dead mother, the gods. If there is somebody on a date you feel real good, you wish, ooh, if he was around, and I'm not even a Christian or a Jew anymore, on a day like this, I just hit the lottery, it's sun shining, my car cranked, and mainly I've been an atheist, but if God came by now, by God, I'd stop the car and I'd rush out and, ooh, hug him. Well, you can't, because you can't find him, and so what can you do? But you got this feeling I'd love to. What can you do? All you can do is to yourself, or out loud if nobody's watching you drive through, just holler, hey, I don't believe in you, but, if you had anything to do with this day, nice job, nice job. Days like this, I could stand to be wrong. That sort of thing. You've got a feeling that gets up to a point, not a personal feeling, it's a life feeling. You may take it personally. Or that you're just suddenly overcome, that you turn around and there's somebody, a white-haired woman that looks at a certain size, and you suddenly think you're a mother, and you almost cry. There you are driving down the expressway. What can you do? You can't get your hands on your mother. She's not anywhere. She's dead. What can you do? You want to do something. The only thing you can do is talk. If it's just something like, gee, or mom, or boy, I miss you. That's the only thing you can do. You would almost burst. Not necessarily literally, but I'm just trying to get you people to see that talk serves more purposes than can ever be simply attacked from a dualistic viewpoint by saying that talk is going on now about trying to be religious when it has nothing to do with being religious, which is true. Except ordinary people could not even fulfill, could not even scratch a little bit the kind of places that life makes them itch in ways of trying to express deep affection for their family, their lover, a departed one, the gods, life. It reaches certain points, and all they can do is talk. Sometimes they don't have to. Sometimes you can turn around to maybe your dog, your cat, your kid, your mother, maybe a priest if it wouldn't embarrass him, and just y'all carry away and you just grab him and just do all that. And maybe I'll do it. But sometimes you can't either do it or there you stand and you just don't feel like hugging a priest today, or the rabbi's beard maybe rats or something in there, and so you just want to go up to him and say, damn good job, boy, you mean a lot to me. You have to say something. It is a transfer of energy, and at times, in mortal circumstances, there is nothing that can be done except talk. There is nothing that is more proper to do than to talk. There is, as always, may I suggest, quite a bit of difference in understanding this and not understanding this. Because if you don't understand this, as is the case in everything in life, and you're simply driven, at times you have to talk, and then at other times you can't talk. It's never satisfying. Because then you leave, you think, why didn't I just hug the guy? Why didn't I just grab my kid and kiss him and tell him I was proud of him? What the hell do I care if people were staying there looking? Why did I have to go, good job? Why was I so embarrassed? Why did I not do it? And then some other time, you may have, whatever the circumstance was, you grabbed somebody and you kissed them, either a rabbi or your kid or a dog, and then the person went, ooh. Or maybe somebody else went, titter, titter, and maybe you thought, God, I shouldn't have done that. In other words, you are always, when you're dealing with, I should have done this, or I should not have done that, you're always dealing with the distinct. Distinct, you understand, is spelled 50 percentage sign. The distinct possibility that you're not going to be satisfied with what you did. But once you understand the basis, some of the bases of what's going on, such as human conversation, and once you understand that there are times, just under ordinary conditions, that there is nothing else to do but talk, whether it be a word, a sentence, that there is nothing else available. Once you understand that, then you do not go away if you partake of it. If you in fact are about to explode and you can't think of any way, you remember that I didn't tell you any great trick to do, or I'm not there to help, and it just, you understand, well, all I got to do is just say no, yes, or hey, thanks a lot, or no thanks. That I've got to do something, but wait a minute, I don't want to do that. To understand that I have reached a point, very likely here, in this little thing, this little situation, that the only thing I can do is talk. Maybe just a word. As you do it, and it's like that is in to walk off and suffer about. It would be as though, well, I have stepped on this very sharp nail. Let's see, now I could play like I didn't mean to, or I could scream real loud, or I could try and slip my foot off while nobody's looking. The main thing is to understand that I need to take my foot off this nail. Whatever it takes. You know, if somebody's going to look, am I going to wait until nobody's watching so that they won't think I'm clumsy and perhaps bleed to death, or at least increase the possibility of getting ptomaine poisoning? Plus, having to spell it when the doctor asks how, and I never can remember how to spell ptomaine, so, which is almost as bad as having lockjaw as having to, well, at any rate. There is, overall, a way that you might begin or get a glimpse of seeing that there is some validity to this. That this possibility continually arises. It is continually right on the horizon. It peaks. It gets around trees. It gets under your shoulders. Sometimes it gets down in your underwear and in your socks. And this is the 3D world now. The distinct possibility of the ultimate triumph of talk. Probably one of the best known proverbs or axioms in the more literate areas of the world is what? Well, you know, I'll say it for you. The pen is mightier than the sword. Which sounds fine, and just almost as fast as you could talk, even you could make some comment like, well, a good idea is just as strong as a good blow to the head. Which as always, again, there is much more behind the simplistic verbal, and it's always simplistic if it has become proverbial. That is, if it's lasted this long, it has turned into a simplisticness, a literal truism, well, almost a literal truism, if that makes any sense. To say that the pen is mightier than the sword is a kind of simplistic reflection of this. That there is a kind of ultimate triumph of talk in mortal affairs, which belies logic, because you can say might makes right. You know, if we're going to have a battle of truisms, one guy can pull out, you know, the pen's mightier than the sword, and you pull out, hey, might makes right, and you know, you parry him off, maybe run him out of town. There is a validity to what I'm suggesting, that under certain conditions, certain time frames, you can see an ultimate triumph of talk. Not nonverbal might, not nonverbal passions that would frighten someone, that even the person didn't have to actually strike a blow to you, or life did not. Just the nonverbal fright element, something going on. But to be human, to be serving the kind of energy purposes that life is using man for, there is real validity, as weak as words are, as young as words are, that the speaking end of the nervous system, relatively speaking, is the younger, the weaker, because people can holler the pen is mightier than the sword, but if somebody says, all right, you've got your choice. We're either going to shoot you or we're going to insult you in the morning. Which do you want? You think, well, I believe I could stand a personal insult in the morning better than I could a firing squad. Now, you say that. But there is a kind of ultimate triumph of talk, or else there would be no, quote, civilization. that would still be making right all across the board. The largest would be prevailing. Dinosaurs still would not only be here, they'd be in charge of the IRS, and they'd be running the Supreme Court, and they'd be the prime ministers of all the known world, except maybe Albania or out of Mongolia. Talk has slipped in, and at times is the only energy transfer available, is the only thing to do, and under certain conditions it will be the ultimate triumph that a no can do as much final damage, have as much of a final impact as could physical injury, a gunshot, a word. That is being civilized. That is having the verbal part, the verbal level of the nervous system loop in man operating, according to your time and place at least, operating at minimal efficiency, and perhaps most likely in the middle of the bell curve for your time and place. That is, you're just average. You're just walking around average Mr. and Ms. America, John Q. Public. On that basis, there is a kind of ultimate triumph of talk. Well, you think about it. I'll think about something else. Trickier part. I won't even lie to you and tell you I'm changing the subject like I usually do. Under certain conditions, there are times and there are areas in which you, that is a person, can't do anything in this condition, this circumstance. They can't do anything until they can describe what they're going to do. Think about that a second. Don't look for metaphors yet. Quite ordinary circumstances, not once in a lifetime occurrences, wherein the person cannot do anything. They can't move. They can't act as an energy conduit until they can describe what they're going to do. I can wait. Think about it again. Well, let's think about this. At first it sounds either silly or what? Impossible or just simply not true. It's an unknown, it's a 5D math, it's a law of mathematics, it's a law of physics. If change is possible, if somebody can do something, if somebody can take some action, it cannot surely be predicated upon the ability or even just the occurrence of the person describing what they're going to do before they do it. That can't be true, right? Oh, come on, that can't be true. Can it? Well, no, it can't be true unless you think about it. Well, and of course, unless you can think. But if you can think and then you think about it, I suggest it's sort of surprising. But see, I started out and said under certain conditions and certain areas. But now let's try this. Any of you who even thought about it and can think, and you thought about it for a second, can you ever do anything for the first time that you can't describe? I smell that too many of you think you're missing something. Look it dead in the eye, just what I'm saying. And at first realize that you would, out of hand, if you're not looking for anything deeper, just what I described, that under conditions, certain conditions, and now I'm insinuating perhaps even beyond that, but under certain conditions, you can't do a certain thing. You can't undertake a certain project, or you can't decide to do something until you describe it. And you should at first think, well, no, that can't be true. If that's all you're saying, that simply can't be true, because you can do things like describing what you're going to do. Think about it. Can you? Is it possible, under any condition, that you're going to do something until you can describe what you're going to do? Let me stretch it and see if it makes it stickier or less sticky. I am, of course, insinuating the answer that it's not possible, that it's always required. It is the minimal to be done for you to even attempt to do something. And this is not even getting yet to any question as to a possibility of success. You can't even attempt it until you can describe it. No sense hanging around where there is the smell of swampy terror, is there? So let's go on now. I'll even make it worse. You are continually in the body of life faced with this. You and everyone else. And not in just mundane everyday matters, as I will try to point out to you. The humans are continually confronted with actions, upcoming actions, that apparently, to ordinary views, have the potential for great impact on ordinary affairs, wherein the people have no experience whatsoever, have never done what they're saying they're going to do and want to do, but to even attempt it, they have got to describe what they're going to do when they've got no experience. All right, I know it sounded even worse. A person seeking political office for the first time. I have decided, calls a press conference, I have decided I'm going to run for king, governor, mayor, alderman. My name's so-and-so, and here's my background, there's the handout, and I'll now take questions. The reporter says, well, what would you do, since you understand the present administration has just last week announced that it seems all but certain we're going to have to raise the millage rate here in the city to keep the schools open. What are you going to do? Now here's a person never been elected to any office, because everybody had to run for office for the first time on some level. And the person says, now don't let your ordinary simplistic thinking drag you off and say, well, if the guy had any kind of smarts, he would have done some preparation, he's had people, he's hired PR men, he's hired pollsters, he's done research. You're missing it. There he stands. And they said, what would you do about the proposed or the threat of a millage rate? And the guy says, that's a good question. In fact, I mentioned that in my handout. You can look at it later. But anyway, I'll respond personally. I go into a little more detail. I would say this, that first off, we're going to have to completely revise the tax digest, because if I remember correctly, it's been at least 8 years since the present administration. So the man's talking, and that may make sense at the 3D level. It's not that the people are going to say, well, that's ridiculous. But do you understand, the man's describing something, and it may sound forceful. It may sound enlightened to the press, or for you to hear it reported later. But you understand, he's describing something that he has never done. Never. And forget that, well, it makes sense, he could do it. You're missing it. You're going to miss the way the body of life grows and works. There he stands, and you can say, well, he's even thought about this before. He's probably been coached. He's probably played out a news conference before he did this. Maybe, but that's not the point. You're missing it. He has got to describe what he's going to do when there is no basis in experience. None. None. But that's always the case. Always. Somebody gets hired, they move somebody from running shop at a high school. They arrested the basketball coach over the weekend in a Motel 6 with 13 Girl Scouts and 2 Boy Scouts. and 27 loaves with white bread. And so it looks like the man will not be back, and they got to finish the season. It's very important. So they take a guy from shop. He seems to be in less bad shape than any other teacher at that school. And the team was doing well. It may make the state playoffs. And so they put him in charge of basketball and the team. They had to. So the press comes around, the local press, and they ask, what does he plan to do about the team? And he admits, I have never coached a basketball team. I'll admit that. I only played half a season back in my high school days. I'm telling you guys. But still the press comes around. It's important in that little community. At any rate, and so they say, well, what are you going to do? Maybe this will be a little bit better. And he hadn't thought. We're talking about a guy that just barely got through a teacher's college in Podunk, Alabama. I mean, he worked his way up. He had to cheat. To get a degree in shop to teach it. And so there he is, and he's not trying to hide anything. He said, I hadn't even been to a basketball game since I've been teaching here, if you don't know the truth. And so the press, and they say, well, but you are in charge. You took the job. He said, well, yeah. He said, I knew how heartbroken the boys would be. I know how much it means to school. So, and they said, well, what do you plan to do? And he goes, well, I guess I'll just, kind of the way I run my classes, I'm going to have to make sure there's some discipline there. Let the guys know I care for them. I do that in class anyway, and tell them that I'm on their side, and perhaps we'll learn together, because hell, I learn in shop. And so he's talking, they're writing it down, and you may be watching it on TV. Say they're coming on TV in their local thing, or you read about it later, and you may go, well, by God, for the man not to have any experience, it all sounds just right. He's saying, but he's already said, I don't know anything about basketball. I hardly know the game. But somebody's got to take over. So I'll make sure that the guys meet curfew, and we'll go ahead with practice. They're going to have to tell me what hours they practice. I don't know. In other words, he's saying, I don't know anything. And yet, they say, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to do such and such. Do you hear it anymore? This is not a social commentary. A few people getting this at other times and other places on this tape. It is not a criticism of any sort. It's no sort of sarcasm. This is the way life works. And people do not notice it. Because it does not work in a literal 3D fashion, or none of this would make sense. If life worked in the way that it appears to work, let me put it to you this way, it wouldn't work. Right? You couldn't have a guy who doesn't know anything about basketball take over a basketball team. There's no sense for me to talk and do gestures and do the thing about the guy thinking, and there's nothing else to say. They say, all right, our coach is in jail. They won't even set bail for him. So what are we going to do? The guys will die if we don't go to the meet this weekend. Well, somebody take over the team. And all the teachers there, and the principal says, well, does anybody know anything about basketball? No. So he turned around and said, well, did anybody try? Maybe the shop guy says, well, I'll try. I'm not doing anything over the weekend. My wife left me. So he says, well, you take over. All right. At an ordinary literal fashion, you would say, well, this won't work. A guy who doesn't know anything about basketball can't take over the team. And yet you do know the scenario I've described, he can. They may win. They may go into the state championship. So you can say, well, I'm not going to vote for a guy that wants to be mayor when he's never been mayor. Now, forget all that. You never notice the dialogue that you have a life, that life runs through you, and you continually nominate yourself. You don't use these words. You accept nominations. You take on nominations that, well, yes, I'll take over this city. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Or somebody's asking about, hey, we can't do so-and-so. And you're staying around, you think, even if you don't say it out loud, you think, well, hell, I could do that. You've never done it, but you say to yourself, well, I could do that because I do so-and-so. It may be the ultimate triumph of talk. People could not, at the ordinary level, even attempt to do that which they may fail at which they may fail, at which that they have no credentials. The guy that doesn't know anything about basketball, the guy that's never been in politics. By all old world vision, they're ill-suited. Smart money may say they will not succeed, and they may or may not. That's not even the point. You may not succeed. It's something you try to figure out. It's something you say that you might do. It's something that you may be criticizing someone else from afar, even historically, that I could beat that. You've never done it. You heard about the way they did it, or you just read about it, and it may have happened 1,000 years ago, and you may have went, psh, Well, if I'd been alive then, Rome would still be in business. The Roman Empire would still be around. You say that, and suddenly, if some real social commentator with 4D vision at least jumped out of the bushes and says, all right, why do you say that? What's your experience? And you could suddenly see you in the midst of the body of life, you would say, well, hey, I'm the shop foreman that hadn't even been to a basketball game in 20 years, and I'm going to take over the team. That's what it is. Because something has happened as soon as you describe. Well, all right, I don't have any experience in basketball, but I'll say this. I know how to work with young people, and I know one thing, some of the guys already know they're in my class, so I've got to instill some kind of trust. The truth is, the guy standing there, he hasn't been coached. He hasn't been primed for this little interview the same way that my fictitious office seeker has. Here's this guy standing there, and they say, how are you going to do it if you don't know anything about basketball? He said, well, I don't. I just barely know the game. You're right. Well, how are you going to do? And he's standing there and, in a sense, improvising. That is life. He's just talking to him. He opens his mouth. And it's as though ordinary people would say he is thinking it out as he goes. He is talking out loud. He's thinking out loud. He's daydreaming. He's musing out loud, and the press is writing it down. But it's more than that. That's what I want you to see. Do you understand that something real has happened when this guy says, well, you know, I admit to you guys, I don't know anything about basketball. I've never coached. I played a few games back, I don't know, about the 10th grade. And they say, well, gee, you know, Mr. So-and-so, how do you, what can you do? And he goes, well, now from some ordinary views, you could say the guy is merely thinking to himself out loud, and the press is writing it down, but something real is happening. He's not daydreaming. This is real. Him saying, well, of course, the first thing I got to get the team together and let them know that, by God, I may not be a coach, but I care about this school and I care about them. That's real. Something's happened. And he says, then I'll get them to help me. That's real. It sounds almost insane. What do you mean they're going to help him? You're turning the team over to a guy that doesn't know the game, and he's going to say, I'm going to get him to help me. You know, this will never work. They may win the championship. It could be the ultimate triumph of talk. But I'm telling you that there are things that humans cannot even consider doing. They cannot plan to do. They cannot even perceive the possibility of attempting it and forget success or failure, because they may fail. They may be ill-suited. It may look impossible for this to ever reach any fruition, and yet the whole situation would not go any further. It would die. It could not be enriched at all were it not for a guy almost thinking out loud. That is, begins to describe, well, here's what I'll do. There may be no basis for it. Where does he go off saying, well, I'm going to get with the team. The most important thing about coaching a team is trust. Well, you just said you never coached a basketball team. No, I hadn't. Well, what kind of teams have you coached? None. Well, what the hell are you telling us the most important thing between a coach and the players is trust? You've been a coach for how long now? He says, 15 minutes. So you can say, well, don't give us that crap. It's not crap. Something real is going on. We got to turn the tape over. Back at it. Well, do you hear it all like me? I don't want to make it much more simplistic than that. That here it is. Let me stay with that example for a second. The man is not a coach at all. He just told you he's not a coach. He was only accepted the position 15 minutes ago, no experience, and yet he is already saying, and it's not, I can get a little more refined with this. Instead of the press, let us say that the principal says, will you take over the position until we can work out something, at least finish out the season? He goes, well, all right, I know what it means to the guys. And so he starts walking out the door, and he hears the principal turn to the assistant principal and saying, you know, geez, let's say his name's Siegfried. He said, you know, I figured that at least we count on Siegfried, but you know, he's got no experience. He knows it. What in the world? How's he going to even start? He just hears that, and so he walks off down the hall toward the gym, and he just heard that. How's he even going to start? Now, forget the press. His own nervous system. That is, he apparently is talking to himself. And what happens? don't have to go any further. If you knew anything about your own nervous system, you paid attention to the dialogue, you would do it to yourself. He's walking along the gym and he would start saying such things to himself. Well, the first thing, he even has pictures. I'm just putting all this in words, but part of it comes out in pictures in the brain, which still requires language. It's just simply tacit talk to himself. But maybe he's got a picture all of a sudden of down there and the guy's waiting. But still, some words he's talking to himself. Well, trust is one of the main things. But it's a combination. I can't do all this. I'm not going to attempt to do James Joyce because he couldn't even attempt to do himself what he tried. But at any rate, it's a combination of pictures and him talking. But he says such things as I was putting in his mouth overtly for the press. That he's walking down the hall to the gym and he's saying, well, the first thing is there's got to be a kind of trust between a coach and the team. I know that. All right, suddenly, if we grabbed him by his little nervous system and say, wait a minute, why do you say that? You've been a coach now, forget 15 minutes, you've been a coach for 3 minutes. What are you guys saying there's got to be, first off, there's got to be a bond of trust between a coach and the team. Where in the world did you get that? Do you understand? He didn't get it anywhere. He got it everywhere. He didn't get it. He didn't read it. He didn't hear it. It was necessary that he describe what he's going to do or he couldn't even attempt it. That's the thing. That is part of the possible ultimate triumph of talk, is he can't even try. There's nothing to do. If he says, will you be a coach? And he says, yeah. And they say, well, good. And the principal leaves and there he stands. If he doesn't to himself describe something, he'll still be standing there. He'll be a statue. He can't do anything. And so it's not a matter of, wait a minute, what do you mean that the main thing, the first thing you got to do is establish a bond of trust, because that's the most important thing between a coach and his team. You already told us you don't know anything about coaching. Where the hell do you get off that kind of talk? It's life talk. Because at this level, in certain ordinary circumstances, there are things that people cannot even attempt. They can't even think about attempting it without talking about it, without describing what they're going to do. And it's not a matter of saying, well, that won't work, or you don't have any basis for saying that. You don't have any experience in that. Where do you get off saying that there's got to be a bond established? The first thing is a bond of mutual trust between a coach and their players. Where do you get off saying that? It's got to be said. You've got to describe things that you're going to do that you've never done. No basis for it. Nothing. How else could ordinary people be religious? How else could you ever fall in love? How could you ever have any sort of relationship with people? You don't know what's going to happen. You have to describe it beforehand. If not to them, you've got to describe it to you. You're in the position. Now, I will, for some of you who've got good memories that have heard some of this in a more complex manner in the past, I'm going to have to shift time because it does not happen in this kind of linear sequence. But it's as though you cannot do anything unless you first off, if it's just a split second, describe it before you do it. But that doesn't mean that that is necessarily the sequence in which it is operating. But you could not do it unless you describe it. You could not think that you're going to do something unless you describe what it is you're going to do. This serves, among other, that I won't begin to go into, but it serves, among other purposes, one that I'll at least hint for you, pretty crude hint. It helps stabilize this multiplicity, this omnidirectional movement of life, of energies going all kinds of ways of life, saying one thing over here and doing something else over here, trying to walk this way over here and then trying to pull against itself, of all the hand puppets hollering I'm a Troy, and over here is hollering I'm a Whig, I'm a Republican, I'm against that. In the midst of all of that is that which you have yet to do, that which you may not be able to do, but that which you even conceive of doing, that life makes you think, well, maybe I will be a coach, maybe I will go back to school. You've got to describe something about it to even try it and fail, or to even think about doing it and then think, I won't even try it. You've got to describe it. I am pondering whether to really drag you through the bushes. I think I'll just give you the first step if I was going to do this further tonight. Because this always serves a purpose. Once I just say the opening line, then I can say, well, maybe I'll come back to it some other time. But if I just say the opening line, it may free me from ever having to drag you. I may never come back to it. That's why I'm saying here pondering. Because I have to ponder. It takes a while for me to ponder how this may be affecting people on tape. That'll be 6 months or 10 years before they see it. See, that's why it takes me a few seconds. Okay. I'm going to give you the opening line, and that's it for the night. But I'll say that maybe I'll pick it back up next time we tape, or sometime in the future, or maybe not. But I got my reasons for even telling you the opening line, and it's this. That those who have the power to misinform have all the power they'll ever need. Of course, those is just a pronoun I just pulled out of the air. In a more complex world, there are those that are singular entities, by the way. How about something a little more, back to more useful, apparently useful, practical moves, methods, plays, to stick with our sports motif for the night. There's several that I've almost let slip out while I've been talking the last few weeks, so I'll let them slip out on purpose and just point them out to you. Assuming you have some kind of continuing awareness of the dialogue inside of you, and assuming that you are now getting a little more complex, that on good days you understand that the dialogue is not between you and you, the dialogue is between you and life. And then on days when you're really good, you understand that the dialogue on another level is actually a dialogue in life. It's life dialogue with itself, but you take it as being a dialogue, once you get a little bit better, as being a dialogue between life and you, which of course already puts you in a complete different field of activity from the rest of humanity already. So assuming that you've got some sort of understanding along those lines, then you should be able to cultivate. I'm going to give you several little methods, and used to I called them tricks, didn't I? I'm glad I don't call them tricks anymore. Because tricks, oh, I don't know, you got to distract people and say, notice over here, there's nothing in my... And you can do that to yourself. If you can't, but now I can't keep it up forever. Oh, what is that? All right. You should be able to cultivate within your own dialogue a more complex relationship with life, just in the dialogue, so it is not a continual, even the appearance of it being, of you being confrontational, being critical, or being debilitatingly submissive to life. I think that about covers it. What you should do is kind of cultivate and use, it's a kind of mindful evasiveness, which, once I describe it, perhaps some of you will see, but which life by example should have already taught you. It's being mindfully, willfully evasive, such as vis-a-vis the dialogue, that is, where you are plugged into life, where you are still alive at this level, and energy flows through you, blood, oxygen, food, all forms of energy, and especially intellectual energy. You being a human, you are motivated. You feel the urge to either do or not do something, to say or not say something. And rather than being confrontational, rather than being critical, or rather than, and not being submissive to the point that you are debilitated, you become, as life should have taught you, by example, you become willfully evasive. The urge is suddenly in you, and here is your response to life. I would love to do that, but it is presently impossible. And you can always throw in, as you well understand, which life jolly well does. But nobody uses it on life. But as I said twice, and I'll hint one more time, nobody uses it on life, but you, by example, should have already been taught. That is, what's life been doing to you all these years? How does much of what life does on a more complex scale, that is going into 4 and 5 dimensions, or at least 4 dimensions of seamlessness of time, that which appears to humans, to human intelligence, to be untoward, ill-conceived, irrational, unexpected, you don't simply see it from a distorted, from a more simplistic view. And when men demand answers, or believe they're seeking answers through all sorts of ways of drugs and religion, philosophy, thinking about it, what do they get from life? You just never looked at it this way. What you get from life is of people from Job hollering out, give me an answer. To slaves in Grecian times hollering, give us our freedom. To you hollering, give me some sense out of this. What does life do? You just never looked at it in these words. Life continually does this. It says, there's nothing I would enjoy more than doing what you're asking. That is to tell you what you want to know, to change things like you point out, how good you've been, what a nice life you've led, and you contributed money to churches and religions, and now you're dying of ptomaine poisoning and you can't even spell it. And you're crying out for justice, and life says, there is nothing, I agree with you, there is nothing I would prefer to do right this second than to see that you get justice, but it literally, it presently is impossible. You do understand? That is what life from one view, from a less than full view, but like a 3D view of something else, does. Seeing as how I haven't gotten you killed or stepped on by life yet, believe me, you can do that to life. I shouldn't have to try to prop you up. That you can have the urge to do something. And I didn't put conditions, anything. Through the dialogue, through the flow of energy in you, you suddenly feel as though you should do so and so. And of course, that's why the dialogue, and part of you may go, Jesus, I don't do that, or I can't do that. But there you are. The urge to do it, like, well, I should do it, I should be morally, I don't know what it is. Something makes me want to do it. If I don't do it, I'm going to suffer over it. I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it right now, that's for damn sure. And I know I'm going to suffer over it. Of course, ordinary people don't even know that. But you people should be at the point that at your old world intelligence, you understand that these things come up continually in life, that I should go do so and so. Something makes me say that to me right now. Makes me think that. I'm not going to do it, at least not right now. And it won't kill me, I don't guess, but I know one thing. I'm going to be worried about this 2 days from now. Maybe 6 months from now. It's just another little old piece of like a short circuit in my wiring. It's like another little rat chewing on the AC line, and someday my house may burn down. Rather than that, as you acknowledge that here it is, the urge, and it comes from the dialogue, don't look anywhere else. Don't look that, well, in some way I am cosmically obligated to undertake this. It's the dialogue. It's the last part of the dialogue that now makes you feel as though you've got, just out of nowhere, and of course you may be able to stop in your ordinary intelligence. So it's not out of nowhere, because this is the kind of thing that my parents taught me. This kind of thing my religion, my culture says. It's the dialogue, right then, the dialogue. Last part has urged you, has spoken up, has moved in you to say either do so and so or don't do so and so. undertake this action. Refrain from the action. Take some critical action. Say something. Don't say anything. Whatever it is, you acknowledge the urge. There it is. Because the urge is life is said. And it's not even personal. Even life, I got to tell you, I pay more attention to you people that I don't hardly ever speak to than life does to you. I'm not bragging on me. There's just less of you than I don't have to deal with everybody, see. Because life does not, it doesn't have to pay attention to what it's saying to you, because it's saying to a lot of people. It just says it. And it just filters out. It's like life has the great switchboard. And it can say something, and it just, I'm not going to describe to you how, it goes out on part of the lines. It gets into a whole bunch of humans' nervous system right then. Then it says just the opposite. Then it says, well, I'll go to A flat, and it says it in another key. Then it says it in another language. Then it says it backwards. And every time it does it, it hits somebody. It goes out these wires. It doesn't matter who. So life says this, and it's not personal. But you suddenly, it seems personal to you because it happens, and you feel this urge that I should do so-and-so. And you're aware that I'm not going to. Or I don't want to. It's going to be so much trouble right now. What a quandary. Forget a quandary. Unless, of course, it's overdue. But here's what you do. If you have to, you may have to use words. Is say it. Of course, you don't have to say it out loud, but you say, because you're talking to life. Don't look anywhere else. Don't look to your parents. Don't look to your religion, your culture. Don't look to your past. It's life. It's that part of the dialogue that told you you should do so-and-so. Just as soon as you feel that, say, and be just as sincere as life is, which is as sincere as you can be, is say, there is nothing, and mean it. Because it doesn't cost anything to mean it. It never costs any more to absolutely mean it than to not mean it. It's only ordinary people that think that they can mean it, sort of, and not mean it. No, mean it. Say, there is nothing that I would prefer to do. In other words, you wholeheartedly agree that God, what an idea that was that you just gave me. There's nothing I'd prefer to do right now, and you could do that little number, a little piece of business, like look at your watch. Life understands all this. If you have to do that, or look up for a clock. But say, there is nothing that I would prefer to do. I couldn't agree with you more. I would love to do this. It's just that right this second, right presently, it's simply, literally impossible. You understand. Because life do understand. Nobody understands more than life. Life will never come back and say, no. So the first few times, if you want to test it, you can say, there's nothing I'd prefer to do than this. I couldn't agree with you more that I should do that. I want to do it. It's just that presently, just this second, it's just impossible. Remember that word, impossible. Don't say inconvenient or I don't want to or I'm not sure. Just say, you don't question. Yes, I agree. It should be done. I could do it. I'm the man to do it. I'm the woman to do it. It's just that right this second, it is impossible. And the first few times, if you want to check it, go say, I'm sure you understand. And you'll see that life fully understands. Fully. There is another little one. I don't know what to tell you about this, so I'll just go ahead. I'll just fake it. I'll just ad-lib this part. I'll deviate from the memorized script. So trust me, I'll try and wing it. There's this little approach, and to myself, since I got to call it something, I've called it, I'm my own brother. And what it is, in many instances when you decide that you want to do something, even if you just say it to yourself, or you ponder whether you should do it, or you have this theory, you have this dream, you have this passing plan that you should do something, is to be on the safe side. Don't ever, until you know better, until it's gone a little bit further, don't take any kind of personal responsibility. Be your own brother, or when the distant outside, be your own sister. that whatever it is that you don't have full confidence in yet, you're just having to describe it to yourself now because you haven't done it, let it be your brother's plan. Let it be his idea. Now, I would suggest you don't ever tell anybody about this. You're saying as much of this. But you can use it. The idea is my brother's. Now, you do understand, you've got a brother. It's got nothing to do with that. You've got to be your own brother. You're your made-up brother. But it has a real interesting physical potential effect on your internal dialogue that I don't want to go into. I'll let you and Life talk about that some other time. Any of you want to pursue this. But you have to become your own made-up brother. But anything made up now, good makeup, remember, don't ever admit it's made up, except in the beginning. Say, all right, I'm going to be my own fake brother. Back to that, don't ever, just be your own brother. Then let Life worry about what's going on. Just refuse until the circumstances are such that you understand. Refuse to take responsibility for ideas and what you think and your plans. They're your brothers. Except remember, you're your brother. You know that. I know that. And of course, Life's going to know it. How you going to fool Life? It's in there talking, and you say, well, my brother's idea is why don't we try so-and-so. And then if Life says, well, that's a dumb idea. You say, well, I tried to tell him. Don't tell him. It ain't me, it's my brother's idea. And then let Life worry about, wait a minute, I know what you're doing. You made up your brother. A made-up brother's as good as any other brother. If you verbalize, if you said it's my brother, we're talking about something real now. The ultimate triumph of talk. Life understands that. Life's not going to say, wait a minute, you just made up your brother. May well be, but now he's a made-up brother. And Life has to go, well, you got me there. Yeah, but you had the idea, and you're just saying it's your brother's idea. All right, by me saying it's my brother's idea, it is my brother's idea. And again, if Life was this dumb, which is not, Life would say to itself, probably, it'd say, God, some of these people are learning from what I've been doing to them. And it'd have to go, okay, never mind, all right. You follow? If not, don't worry about it. In fact, if you do follow, you may should worry about that. There is one more. I'll do my little acronym. I like this one too. Remember, just because something may sound funny doesn't mean it's a joke, folks. This is a kind of tool, and it is known, at least amongst my circle, which amounts to me and my brother. ATMMW ... Instead of to yourself, especially, instead of ever to yourself thinking, blah, 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 but then I thought, no, you're thinking to yourself. All right, let's say you're talking to somebody. You don't have to do this out loud, but you do it to yourself. And somebody's saying, well, how did you come up with so-and-so? I thought you were trying to do such and such. And you said, yeah, I tried that, but then I thought, then I should blah, 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 blah. You understand what I'm getting at? That somebody asks you, somebody offers a critical comment, somebody asks you a question. If you can follow this right quick, laugh even. But let's say somebody else. I said, why in the world did you change when you said you were going to try to do so-and-so? And at least to yourself, you go, well, I tried that, I thought it worked, but then I thought. Is don't ever say, and then I thought. Don't ever say to yourself, well, I thought if I did so-and-so. But then when I heard about this theory this guy had, I thought, no, that's not true. Or I thought, wait a minute, I've read that before and I saw through that. Don't ever, if you know how to use this, ever say, I thought. Say, instead of I thought, say, and then my mind went. That is, You're not saying when somebody says, well, why, when you kept trying to move that thing uphill, why did you decide to leave it where it was? Don't ever say to yourself, at least, don't ever say, well, I thought it'd be easier. Don't say that. If they say, well, why did you do it that way? You think, well, I tried it, and then my mind went, boom, 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 boom. Not I thought. My mind went. You understand? I don't mean your mind went. Is it, well, I tried to do so-and-so, but then my mind went, then you fill in the blank. Like then my mind went, hey, leave it there. I tried my best to do so-and-so, but then my mind said, oh, forget it. Especially if your mind said forget it, and your brother went, lie. Excursion. It was just a little excursion. All of you people, you could really find this to be of some value, or I wouldn't suggest it. Back to where I opened tonight, that I verbally, quite directly put it to you, that there are times and circumstances wherein talk is the only thing that you can do. And I gave you those handful of little examples and sketched around. Try, let's say for 4 days. Try and see how many that you can come up with in life. That you can see them. You remember them. With you, other people, that under certain conditions, it may not be the condition is always exactly the same between two people, between a husband and a wife, or whatever it is. But there are times when you see in you, and then you see it in other people as possible, that there are instances wherein something needed to happen. And with, amongst the people, amongst this, even just two people, a relationship with the energy, it seems to almost be frozen there, and it can't move, and it wants to move, and the only thing possible, the only thing to do is to talk. Take a look.